Hello, everyone. So excited to have you yet again. And I'm Sharon Roszia, and I'm going to be interviewing the president of NCAP, the CEO, the kind of everything, the founder, Adam Pertman, also the author of Adoption Nation, which has just been a wonderful book leading in our field for several years now and often updated. So, Adam, welcome. It's very nice to have you to this NCAP series.
It is a pleasure to be here, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the lead on this. This was, for everybody who needs to know, this was Sharon's idea, Sharon's execution, and it's wonderful.
Which also requires Graham, who's our Zoom expert. I'm going to start out, as I do with all interviews, with a question, and that is that they can read all about you on the NCAP website. Your whole biography is there. And so it would be wonderful, actually your autobiography is there. And so it'd be wonderful for people to look at that. But what things in particular are you proud of, want to make sure they don't miss? What 5 things would you like to be able to share about who you are in this field as we begin this interview?
Okay, let's see if I can get to 5. Either I'm going to get to like 13 or I won't make it to 5, but I'll give this my best shot.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to say is that professionally, certainly how I perceive myself and how most people see me is as a professional in this field. And I guess sort of an unusual a contributor to the field. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a researcher, though I do things that both those folks do. So the thing, I guess the things I want to start with, if I'm going to get to 5, is that I didn't always do this. This has not been my only profession, and that's not necessarily something people know or should know. No reason for them to know, but like everybody on Earth, we are the end product of our experiences. And so I think professionally, I am where I am and who I am because I did a lot of other things before. And they enabled me, they taught me, they contributed to my understanding of the world, to my compassion for children and families, et cetera, et cetera. So I would professionally, I'll start with, I was a journalist for almost 25 years. So, and there's some part of me that still sees myself that way. It's not most of me, certainly, because I have been away from it for a long time. But it shaped a lot of what I do. It shaped a lot of the perceptions about myself professionally and personally.
You ask good questions, that's for sure.
I learned to ask questions. I learned to listen. I learned to do research. I mean, journalistic research is not academic research, but my God, I could not have led a bunch of PhDs at the Donaldson Institute if I didn't know what the heck I was doing with research. And thank goodness I could. And I learned to write. I learned to edit. I learned to think about big picture stuff and how to communicate it. So that was invaluable. And that experience helped shape everything that came after it, certainly, and most importantly, in the adoption world.
Back up for 1 minute. I'm interrupting you, Adam.
Yeah,
you mentioned now the Donaldson Institute. Would you just back up for a minute and explain what you did there and what it was? Because it certainly was a groundbreaking idea and really an institute that had never existed before.
Well, so so we're going to get to either 5 or 25, but I'll just ramble on and see what we do. So if first, and I will answer your question directly, but first, getting to be a journalist was also a journey, right? And so I was a multiple college dropout. I think I had, I don't know, something like 20 jobs by the time I was 22, something crazy. And they all, formed who I am. And, I traveled a lot nationally and internationally, both before I was a journalist and once I became one. And all those things helped shape who you are professionally, again, personally as well, and sometimes it's hard to separate the two,
Right.
but certainly professionally, I was a substitute teacher. I was, I went to school to be a elementary school teacher. All those things, they grow your passion. They show your priorities. They both show who you are, and they shape you both simultaneously, I think. And so, and without going into all the details, so all of that led to the journalism career, which I'm, very, very proud of. And without that journalism career, and now I'll answer your question. I could not possibly have dreamed of writing a book. And it was the first edition of Adoption Nation that got me certainly into the field in a serious way. And without that book, I would never have been asked to head the Donaldson Institute, which is important. It's important to say that I was not the founder or the first leader of that organization. It was a solid, strong, small, but influential and important organization before I got there. I will say, and Lord knows, I will say this, and please believe I mean it. People who know me will believe I mean it. They were crazy people to hire me to take the lead of that organization. I had no experience running a national not-for-profit research and policy organization, but it turned out I could do it. And the reason that I could do it was because of everything that came before. Again, I won't go into all the details. So, and what I was able to do is lead the Donaldson Institute in what I think is a genuinely unique model to become the foremost thing in its field. The work we produced on my watch, and I'm very proud to say that I helped produce in many ways, it really helped shape policy, practice, used in courtrooms, used in classrooms. To this day, I get thank yous from people for thanks for producing this or this paper or that research, because they're using it. They're actually using it. We created a model that helped to inform the world, and more of it than I ever imagined, and helped to shape that world for the better, which is,
It's so important as we move more and more in terms of practice being based on research.
Absolutely.
It's not just being led by our feelings and experience, both of which count, but having something to back it up. And
absolutely.
people are hungry.
But what else I learned, Sharon, is that and the world is coming to this as well. One of the watchwords of our time is to include people with lived experience in whatever we do. And I'm 100% believer in that, though I'm trying to change that dialogue too. It should be people with lived expertise. We're not just talking about people who went through something and they got it.
Right.
They learned, they have something to teach.
Right.
And that is something that I learned during the course of my years at Donaldson, and certainly since I started NCAP, that experience is priceless. It can't be taken as an absolute because your experience is different, my experience is different, Graham's experience, but together they enrich us, and we have to listen to them. And those voices, those voices of expertise are at least as important as the research. They illustrate the research, they bring it to life, they inform it. And so, yes, I love that evidence-based is a thing, although, and we can talk about this later if you want, although some of that is being thrown to the wind in the current political world in which we live. But combined, they guide us, they show us the way. Whether we follow the way or not is another question altogether.
Well, and NCAP becomes a touchstone, a place to at least go and learn from it and use it. And it's evolvingly more and more and more important in a world that doesn't check back on the truth. So
and that's a really important lesson. Yeah. I mean, big. So actually, one more. I have no idea what number we're on, but one more professional observation or something. And again, this is a sort of continuum of learning and applying experience and so forth. It was without the knowledge I gained, the research we did, without the people that I met who did have learned expertise over and over and over and over for all those years, decades. Without it, I couldn't have thought to start NCAP. I couldn't have thought to do it because, and this is important for anybody listening to this, because our mission, I deeply, deeply believe that our mission is the bullseye that we have to hit if we're going to continue to make substantive, real, demonstrable, measurable progress. What I learned, and thanks to Susan Smith and all the other scholars with whom I got to work, I was honored to work. What I learned was that we have the wrong system in place to get the job done. And I remember, I vividly, it wasn't an epiphany or anything, maybe something close to revelation, after we did some work on post-adoption services. And what dawned, and this led to NCAP, is, what do you mean post-adoption services? You mean we've done our job and now we're going to give them something extra?
Right, right.
Right. And what we wrote and what we know is that post-adoption services are a zip code problem. If you live in one place, you might get some, in another place, you might get another. If the state has a budget surplus, there might be some more. If it has a deficit, some of them will be cut. What are we doing? If we're going to, and that led to, and I'll shut up in a second, and that led to this, this light going off. The system is about child placement. It's always been about child placement. And if that's our bottom line, every child deserves a safe, permanent, loving family. No argument there. Hopefully the family they were born into. But every child does, of course, deserve that. But if that's the end point, then, hey, here's a kid for you. Bye. Hope it works out for you.
It brings up an image for me. Rick Delaney years ago was talking about this, therapist in Colorado, and he said it's kind of like we recruit them into a hot air balloon and we give them a kid, and then we cut them loose and they're up there floating, free floating, trying not to fall out of the basket. And that's where we leave them. We don't see this as an ongoing obligation. And I love that you're touching on that.
Well, the other thing that we learn, and this gets to the question of, do people know the truth? Do people know about it? And people don't. I mean, adoption's history is one of stigma, shame, embarrassment, driving people underground. I mean, oh my God. And then, of course, everyone understands it perfectly. And of course, they don't. And it's not reasonable to expect them to. And one of the really critical pieces that people don't tend to understand is that most kids adopted today, most people adopted today, are from the foster care system. And plus, if you add up the ones who come, and the number is very small, of kids adopted from abroad, you're talking about a population that's overwhelmingly suffered from early childhood trauma, loss, abuse, neglect. So to think that you can just, here's a kid, good luck, I'm so happy for you, your parents, is crazy. So we're taking kids out of one difficult situation and too often creating yet another one. And so that was the light bulb, right? We need to, yes, every child deserves to be in a safe, permanent, loving family, but we need to add a fourth word. They deserve to be in a successful family too. And so our job, our bottom line, and NCAP's mission is to move policy and practice to enable families, children and families to succeed, straight up. We still need they need to be in a good family, in a safe, loving family.
And I would add the word,
that family needs the wherewithal to succeed, and that's the game.
And that becomes an intergenerational success model.
Absolutely.
So, I think we have to add that word. I'm going to move us forward because we could talk all day and that would make an impossible editing problem for Graham. If we move away from the professional things that you've done, and you've certainly built a wonderful understanding of how you got where you are and what passion you bring to this, what are the personal things about you that you're willing to share? What makes you a person that we all really care about and are willing to follow? What do you like when you're not doing adoption work?
Well, those may be different questions, but I'll do the best I can to answer them. So, I mean, the thing that shapes me as a human being, my work does. I mean, anybody who is involved in work that they're passionate about, as opposed to, and I don't diminish the work of anybody who does it because they need a paycheck, or because it's just interesting. But anybody who does work that they're passionate about is shaped by the work. And it is personal. It's deeply personal. You know, I would burst with pride. I do burst with pride for not about the research I've conducted, but about the people who I've touched. You know, that's what you're striving to do. It's about helping human beings. So the work is part of the answer, and I work too much. But my family's the bigger answer, and everybody says that, and everybody probably being honest too. But I would not understand the world in the way that I do. I would not have the heart that I do, if it weren't for my wife and kids. I mean, they are, and I'm going to cry, but they are the engine. You know, they are the reason I do what I don't know what I'd be doing if I didn't have them. I know that a big reason why I do what I do is because I do have them, and I am blessed by that every single day. So my family, to understand who I am in a non-professional way, is one big thing. And, you know, I have a family with special needs and with adoption, and, you know, like you, Sharon, we share some of those things. So a family with complexities, and not always with the smoothest, easiest road. And that's also part of what shapes you, right? How you deal with those challenges is everything. Do you learn from them? Do you learn to surmount them? Do you give in to them? These are all parts of how we become who we become. So that's certainly part of it. So other things, personal things. I love to cook.
Yes.
You know, it is my avocation and a passion as well. I like to eat too, but the cooking part is really, you know, a creative outlet for me as much as my writing, maybe.
Yeah.
Close call. And
It's
I love
almost
to
a
write.
form of meditation when you talk about it. It's almost like your cooking allows you to have a real break and a kind of a meditation as you're creating food.
I think that's a really fair way to look at it. And it's a creative outlet. You know, maybe the people who eat my food will disagree, but I think that it's fun. You know, every day is a day in the chopped kitchen in my house.
Yeah.
For those who watch Food Network.
Yeah.
And that's fun. It's a distraction. It's a creative thing. It's fun. And at the end of it, you get to eat. So that's certainly a part of me. Travel has always been a part of me. Pre-COVID, I've spoken about a few conferences since COVID, but all like this, you know, in front of the camera that's on my laptop. And I'm going to speak at a conference. It doesn't matter because people are going to watch us at different times, but at a conference in New Orleans coming up, and I'm relishing getting out of the house and getting on a plane, even as, because I'm not crazy or stupid, even as I do it with some trepidation, because I would love not to come home and give my family COVID. So, you know, life is complicated, but you make choices. So travel is certainly, for many decades, been a part of what shapes me and what I love. And I have no idea how many that is, but that's enough.
Well, the numbers aren't the issue. It's just the discussion that's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
and I love, and I certainly love writing, reading. I mean, they're part of who I am.
Are you a theater goer? Are you somebody who likes to go to theater? And
I love to go to theater. I've never done it as much as I wish I could. Or I don't know if that's circumstantial or preferential, but I certainly appreciate it. I do love it. For a while I reviewed movies, and that was a gas. I've gotten to do all this fun stuff and gotten paid for it. Can you imagine?
It's exciting. Yeah.
Oh, it is. A mentor of mine decades ago said something that was really touching, not touching as in it made my heart go pitter patter, but really affected me in demonstrable ways that really changed me, that I took to heart and acted on. He said, and it was on the occasion of his, I think it was his 60th birthday, which back then I thought, oh, he got old. Young guy. Yeah, I asked him, what David was his name. I said, what do you think about, is when you hit that milestone, that number? And he said, and he really was thoughtful. And I'll make this short. He said, you have to look back at your life and be glad of what you've done, not just, I'm getting that wrong. Graham, I'm going to start that over if that's okay. Because the wording was really important, and it was the trigger for me, in a very real way. I asked him on the occasion of his 60th birthday how he looked back his life, and he said very thoughtfully that it's not just a matter of doing something, it's a matter of looking back and knowing you had done it. And what that means is, and time after time, I've lived by this. Do I feel like doing this? No, I really don't, but I want to have done it.
Mm-hmm.
I bungee jumped as a stupid example, but there are lots of better examples. And I looked down and I wanted to climb back down the stairs.
Yeah.
But more, I wanted to have bungee jumped. I wanted to have done that. And I've done lots of crazy stuff as a journalist, especially covering wars and other interesting things, because I want to have done it. And it is a different prism through which to look at your life. And I'm so grateful. There have certainly been times, and I can name them during my career in adoption and child welfare, where I didn't feel like doing something, but I needed and wanted to have done it. And I think the trick, if you want a life that you don't have too many regrets about, you need a whole lot of those moments to have done it, to have taken the jump, so to speak. And that's, anyway, that's certainly part of what has shaped me.
You know what? That's a beautiful piece. I hope we get to capture that really well, because I think it's a lesson for everybody who's watching this interview. Yeah. So let me move on. I'm curious about, you went ahead and researched and wrote about adoption. So I'm curious to know what led you in that, of all the things you could study and do as a journalist, what brought you, do you think, to this particular field? How'd you get here? I mean,
I know it's interesting, Sharon, because I don't know the exact answer to many things, but I know the answer to that question.
Okay.
And so I'm going to tell the story as briefly as I can here. So I was a journalist. My wife and I could not make a baby the old-fashioned way. We went to an adoption agency, which my first advice to anybody who wants to enter the adoption world is educate yourself. I think that's baseline, bottom line. We didn't do that. We found an adoption agency. We went through the first informational session. And at that session, I think it was an hour, I left that session and I told somebody sitting next to me, I found this out years later. She told me, I said it. She said that I told her, wow, I have to write about this. Go figure. And the reason was that I saw a world, in an hour, I heard about a world I knew virtually nothing about. And now looking back, I say I knew less than nothing, because so much of what I thought I knew was just stereotypes and stigma, shame, stuff I'd seen on television. I didn't know squat. And what do journalists want to write about? Things that affect a lot of people that people don't know a lot about.
Right.
And, if I got a radar gun on the highway, I'd want to write about the radar gun. And so I started writing, and because it was a journalistic exercise, and people assume it was because I was passionate, I was an adoptive dad, and none of that. It was a journalistic exercise. I thought it was really interesting and would make for a good story. The short version is that I wrote wound up writing a series of stories for the Boston Globe, It was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. So, I guess there was something interesting after all, but it was a journalistic exercise. And then that let every journalist wants to write a book. I started, I got a publisher to write a book about adoption. And it was really during the writing of that book, about 3 chapters in, literally, that I realized this is not a journalistic exercise. This is about my kids. This is about their parents. I mean, their first parents, their families, about my wife and me and their new family. And all the injustices, all the policy problems, all the challenges, all the wrong. Because if everything was honky-dory, I wouldn't run away about it. Right. But everything was not honky-dory. I learned, and it was revelatory, what I learned, the people I got to interview, the things that I got to learn. And so once that understanding set on me, I rewrote the first 3 chapters and then kept going, because it became a much more personal book. You know, it's still a book with stories about a million things, you know that. Yes. And that is, you know, I think rich with research, because that's really important to me. But that personal aspect changed everything. And it was the reason I love to joke in speeches, you know, why I did what any good dad would do for his kids. I quit my job. But that is the reason I quit my job. I wanted to do something for them and all the thems out there. And so, and then, you know, I was lucky enough, and it's luck, that I got that phone call from the Donaldson Adoption Institute saying, "You want to do this?" I went, "Sure."
What a great circle. Yeah.
But forgive me, but what happened was what I wanted to do with my life and the wherewithal to do it, you know, came together, and that really did change everything.
That's a great response, and very, very helpful. It gives a backstory, if you will. And I love that it occurred right there at the adoption agency in 1 hour. Because you were a journalist, you picked up how much of the story was missing even then.
It was crazy. Yeah. They were saying very, very clear and obvious things that I was completely ignorant about.
So we all get to retire someday. And I'm curious.
Wait, let me, you're wrong about that, but ask the question. Sorry.
Well, at some point, maybe when you're 99, because you come from a family that lives along, if I remember, you know, maybe when you're 99 and you're looking back on your career, what do you hope people will say about you? You know, what might you want on your professional tombstone, so to speak?
Oh, how to do this without sounding entirely corny. That I made a difference, that you know, I got X number of years on Earth, and I did something with them. Mm-hmm. Again, that's not to disparage anybody, zero, who, you know, has a tradition, I don't even know the right word, who didn't have a big impact on the Earth. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how big my impact will have been on the Earth, but it had some impact. I did something that I think was important, that changed the conversation, that informed people. And I do see myself as an educator and as an advocate. So those things are really precious to me. And I was lucky enough to get to do them. And that word that I like, NCAP, and to be successful at some of them. That would be really fabo. And if you can, I know it's professional, but if you can tell my kids that I love them, and hope that they're proud of me, that would be good too.
So underneath, and I want my kids to look back and know that I did good in the world, and they were my motivation.
And they were my motivation, and they really, really were.
Yeah,
very demonstrably, literally.
Yeah. So as we finish up, I want to know, what would success in your work look like? What's the goal, the outcome? If you could have anything happen looking forward, what do you want? I mean, you've done this, you've got these great words connected to NCAP, you know, to connect, strengthen, and empower. And you know that the system is broken. So what would success look like to you?
You know, it's a great question. What I would like to say is that policy will change and practice will change and minds will change. And some of that is happening. And some of that is, you know, the contribution NCAP and I and you have made. But realistically, knowing that we're not going to change everything in the short number of years we all have left, what I really would, I'm going to be literal here with you. I would love if every social worker, educator, policymaker added that word successful to the sentence that all of them utter all the time, which is that every child deserves to be in a safe, permanent, loving family. If I can leave this earth with everyone saying every child deserves to be in a safe, loving, permanent, and successful family, we've changed the conversation, we changed the goal, and that would put a permanent smile on my face, because I want to stay the optimist that I am, and that would make me optimistic.
And what can you give me a definition from your perspective on what that word successful encompasses?
That's the complicated part. It's the right question. Well, first, let me just say, if we can get that word into the sentence, then we're finally starting to ask the right question. What does success mean?
Perfect.
I mean, that would be a wonder if instead of saying, look, we placed this many kids last year, and those are good numbers. I'm glad they're going up. Or from foster care, they're going up. But they're not sufficient. It's not a numbers game. It's about human beings and what happens to them. And so we need to have that word. So that's the question people ask. What does success mean? And the answer is it's going to be different for everybody. It's not a one size fits all. But if that's your goal, you're going to do different things than if your goal is child placement. And so we have to change that goal.
Thank you. I've been wanting to tease that out on screen for a long time because I get asked that question a lot. What does that mean?
Absolutely.
So thank you.
And I love it. And the first thing I tell people is, finally, you're asking the right question.
And isn't that the key to success, is knowing the right questions, not necessarily having the answers, but knowing the questions to ask.
100%. A wise person once said to me, if you want to get the right answer, you got to ask the right question.
Right.
And that's exactly right.
Thank you, Adam. I know we could listen to you for a very long time, and we will. We'll get a chance, all of us, to hear you for several years. But I hope this is a great introduction for the folks who are not familiar with you to see a real live, thoughtful expression of who you really are as a leader in this field. Yeah. Well, thank you.
You too, by the way. All of those words right back.
Thank you. Thank you.